Pacific Rim Aftermath takes place in 2034, a year before the events of Uprising, but after the breach was sealed by Gypsy Danger and Stryker Eureka. There haven't been any kaiju attacks since then, and the world thinks that they are a thing of the past. And according to the official description, Aftermath introduces the next generation of survivors, principally this guy. His name is Joshua Griffin, former Ranger and pilot of Mark III Vulcan Spectre, which was Australia's first Jaeger. You alright there, mate? You wanna fight? This guy had 6 battles under his belt and 3 kills, but now he's very much on the downward slope of his career, with his days of being revered as a hero long behind him. Now he gets into fights in noodle bars before going scavenging for Jaeger parts to sell to the mob. He has a flashback of Vulcan Spectre's final fight against MUTAVORE, where as you can see, he loses, he gets his head ripped off. Then guess who shows up? Yes, it's Hannibal Chau, and he looks like he has seen better days. And you know what? There had better be a damn good explanation for how he's still alive. Last we saw him, he had just been eaten by the Baby Kaiju, remember that? Then we meet the Sisters of the Kaiju, who are parading a quote-unquote relic from their gods, a piece of SPINEJACKAL's hand, up and down Hollywood Boulevard. Like, why does nobody arrest these guys? They're clearly maniacs. Hannibal Chau somehow manages to get hold of the SPINEJACKAL hand and carts it off to his lab, and we learn that Griffin and the team were after a synaptic capacitor, which he takes back to Mech Tsar, a Ukrainian mob boss with a Winter Soldier arm that he's somehow found himself working for. The synaptic capacitor is the last part that they need to get this working, and it's kind of a mini Jaeger that can be piloted by just one pilot, called Enforcer. It then flashes back to Vulcan Spectre's fight with SPINEJACKAL, and Josh Griffin explains that SPINEJACKAL had a crown of eyes all around its head, giving it panoramic 360 vision. Vulcan Spectre manages to defeat it though by throwing the propeller that he'd just ripped off a fucking wind turbine and cutting the top of its head off, and that was awesome. Anyway, Joshua Griffin, in his mini Jaeger Enforcer, is helping Mech Tsar to defeat another mob, headed up by Giovanni Capello, when it turns out that she has another mini Jaeger called Bruiser, and it becomes clear that she's building her own army of mini Jaegers. Josh stumbles on the Sisters' Church of the Kaiju, built in the Yamarashi skull, when he sees Martina, an ex-girlfriend of his who he thought was dead. Back with Hannibal Chau, we see how he was able to escape being eaten by the Baby Kaiju. And you know that little knife that he carries around with him everywhere? Yeah, he cut his way out with that. Implausible? Not at all. But now that he's escaped, he is suffering from kaiju blood poisoning and in a constant state of agony. We see what he and his scientist here has been working on, the first biologically engineered kaiju that they nickname Baby. Josh is still following Martina around when one of the sisters tries to convert him. When they find out that he used to kill kaiju for a living, they mob him, but Bruiser shows up and starts randomly firing a freeze cannon at every man, woman and child in the crowd before smashing them to bits and claiming the territory for Mech Tsar. And I love this panel here, where under the still falling debris of frozen human body parts, this guy puts a hand on her shoulder and is like, "Hi there." He doesn't care about the horrible, bloody genocide happening around him. He's just thinking, ooh, might be able to revisit some old pastures here, if you know what I mean. Actually, I don't. You wanna fight? We see one panel of Vulcan Spectre's fight with Rachnid, which resulted in 4,000 dead, apparently, before Martina explains how she ended up being taken in by the Sisters of the Kaiju. Josh tries to make her see why they are conning her, but she doesn't want to know. Meanwhile, these guys, who I'm pretty sure are the ninja division of the Sisters, go into Hannibal Chau's lab and brand him an infidel before trying to kill him and his kaiju, calling it an abomination. The kaiju kills the Mother Superior, the last remaining sister, and breaks out onto the street. Joshua Griffin tries to fight it with the stick. That's like going up against a tank with a pair of socks over your hands. I'm gonna bite you. Before Martina comes in between them, saying that the Mother Superior was wrong to think of it as an abomination. I don't really get her logic here. Surely if she was that brainwashed, she would just blindly follow what the Mother Superior wanted her to do? Why did she choose now to suddenly go the other way? I don't know. It's beautiful. And unsurprisingly, the kaiju tries to eat Martina, but Bruiser intervenes, giving Joshua enough time to suit up in Enforcer, and long story short, Baby eats Bruiser's pilot before ripping Enforcer's arm off. Joshua detonates Enforcer's Tesla coils and blows it up in an attempt to kill Baby, which of course doesn't work. And he's eventually helped out by Mech Tsar, piloting her own Jaeger, yes, a third one, called Atomic Queen. and just as she seems to get the upper hand, there's an overload and it explodes before she can eject. If I've got this right, it turns out that Martina, that treacherous bitch, was the one who caused the overload. Again, simplifying the story a little, it turns out that Hannibal Chau had 3 other hybrid kaijus in his basement, and he leads them to Baby and they start fighting. This distracts Baby for long enough for Joshua to get a killing shot in, and it explodes. Hannibal Chau is killed by the scientist that was working for him. And that's your lot. Bob's your uncle, Tina's your auntie, and Rainbow Caramel is your cousin who takes My Little Pony a bit too seriously. You don't find out what happened to Joshua Griffin. You don't know if Martina got away with killing Mexar by causing the overload. It just cuts off. But that said, it's not quite the end, because tacked on is a story about Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal? What the fuck? Jake Pentecost. So anyway, it starts with Jake snooping around Giovanni Capello's house, this guy from earlier, remember? And he's looking around supposedly the largest collection of Jaeger artifacts outside the PPDC to find the drift core from Stryker Eureka. Now apparently the memories and emotions of the pilots are stored in the drift core, and as Stacker's last words to Marco said, "You can always find me in the drift." So I guess, in the search for some closure, Jake plugs himself in. He sees memories of when Jake was young, which I don't understand because the whole point is that Stacker wasn't there for his son at this stage. But if he wasn't there, how are these his memories? Are they Jake's memories? But if that's the case, why is the drift showing Jake his own memories that he already has? Anyway, there's finally some cool panels of Coyote Tango, which I really appreciate, as it gives us more of a look at the fight with ONIBABA. Of course, this is where Stacker met Marco and the beginning of the resentment that Jake felt towards her, as Stacker seemingly gave her most of the attention, whilst Jake was constantly being compared to his father and struggled to live up to the mantle. Then there's a short in the drift core, which means that Jake starts to see Chuck Hansen's memories. Wait, what? As if it wasn't bad enough that they tacked on a mini Jake Pentecost story into the main story, they've tacked on a mini Chuck Hansen story into Jake's story. When did this turn into Inception? Remember, he was the other pilot present when Stacker sacrificed himself. We see a little of the relationship between Chuck Hansen and his father Herc. You wanna fight? Hey, that's my line! You Iceman looking motherfucker. No, wait, you're right, Chopper, he does look like Iceman. Well, Jake has to witness the final moments of his father's life. He realizes that if he's plugged into the drift when Stryker's payload explodes, he'll die. So he scrambles to get the cables out when he's suddenly able to hear his father's thoughts. And his father is just about to tell his son that he loves him when boom! And Jake, finding out that his father's final thoughts were about him, is a very powerful moment, and should have been the ending in my book. But the graphic novel chooses to show us Jake escaping the mobster's house and telling him that he's not, and never will be, his father. And actually, this part was pretty good, although I did feel that tacking it onto the end of Joshua's story was kinda shit. It really should have been his own story in its own novel. So overall, Aftermath was very decent, without being amazing. I really liked the last battle actually. It wasn't just over in 1 or 2 panels like a lot of the fights have been in this graphic novel series, and you really get a good look at the action. I thought we could have seen more of the real kaiju rather than the homebrew basement ones we got, but I did like the fact that Baby looked a lot like a mini Kaisep or a meathead, as those are 2 of my favourite kaiju designs. I think it must be something to do with the big devil horns. I love that on a kaiju. Like the devil in that Tom Cruise movie. Which one was that called again?
I think you mean Willow, don't you?
No, not Willow.
No, it is. It definitely is Willow.
Tom Cruise wasn't in Willow. Who was he in Willow?
He's the dwarf.
Idiot. Still, would have loved to have seen more Scissor or Rachnid that were only in 1 panel each, and FAUXFACE, which again is only given a few panels. FAUXFACE looks cool though. Same applies to the Jaegers. It's a bit of a shame that we're dealing with homemade Jaegers, because it just doesn't feel as epic or dangerous as the real thing. Vulcan Spectre looked awesome, but it really was the mini Jaegers that took center stage, and they were, okay. I loved seeing more of the ONIBABA battle, and the ending of the Jake Pentecost story was surprisingly satisfying. Much better than the ending of the Joshua Griffin story actually, but the Jake Pentecost story really felt bolted on, making this character, again, feel like an afterthought. I was also hoping to see the sisters explored further too. What they did show did shed a little light on them, but not as much as I'd hoped, and I thought that the fact that they suddenly turned into ninja assassins, honestly, weird as fuck. Now, whilst I did find the Joshua Griffin story much stronger than Jake Pentecost's story, of course, I did find it quite chaotic in a way. Like 1 minute you're with Joshua Griffin, and then you go into his flashback, then it cuts to Hannibal Chau in the quote-unquote present, then it cuts to his flashback, then you're back with Joshua Griffin. It does kind of jump all over the place. So Aftermath really does expand the universe in quite drastically different ways to the previous 2 graphic novels. and for some reason I wasn't expecting as much of it as I was from Tales from Year Zero or Tales from the Drift, so I was really pleasantly surprised. This is pretty good, guys.